Hello, I'm Josephine Ive and I'm standing outside of one of Australia's leading five-star hotels. In this industry, we are all trying to improve our service to the guests. And many of us have forgotten, in fact, that non-verbal communication is a very, very important line of communication within this industry. Body language, in other words. Body language tells us what other people really mean. It is the art of seeing what others are thinking. In fact, most of us are giving away quite a lot with our body language all the time. We may be showing that we're lying, we're shy, we're nervous, we're happy, for whatever reason. Most of us have also been able to communicate in this way since we were born. From the time we first recognised our parents, we were able to receive and give some form of communication. In fact, of all in communication, 87% is through the eyes, 9% through the ears, and 4% from other senses. These startling percentages should in fact indicate to us just how much body language affects our day-to-day life. In fact, body language and understanding body language is the difference between asking a question and already knowing the answer by looking at another person's body movements. Regardless of culture, although there are different cultural body gestures, words and movements occur with great predictability. For instance, we all cross our arms from time to time, but this in actual fact could mean one of three things. One, we may be feeling cold. Two, we could be feeling defensive. And three, we might simply be just feeling comfortable. To help you better understand body language, we're going to cover quite a few topics in this program, including basic body language, personal space, factors inspiring interpretation, and fine-tuning your own body language. If you want people to be comfortable in your presence, the golden rule is to keep your distance. The more intimate our relation is with other people, the closer we are permitted to move within certain zones. Most animals have a certain airspace around their bodies that they claim as their personal space. Man is no exception in that he too has his own personal air bubble that he carries around with him. The size of the bubble is dependent on the environment in which he was raised, so this personal zone distance is therefore culturally determined. Some cultures, such as Japanese, are more accustomed to crowding, others may prefer wide open spaces and in turn like to keep their distance. In this industry of hospitality, we should be aware of our intrusion into guests' personal space. Although some people may regard it as friendliness, you may make others feel uncomfortable. Personal space can be redefined into 4 distinct zone distances. When we find ourselves addressing a large group of people, this is known as the public zone, usually over 3.5 metres, and seems a comfortable distance at which we choose to stand in these situations. However, the social zone, about 1 to 3.5 metres, is a step or two closer, but still keeping our distance from strangers. It's normally reserved for people whom we do not know very well. This zone includes the new employee at work, for those tradespeople involved in doing repairs, and sales assistants in shops. Moving closer into the personal zone, about half a metre or just over 1 metre, this is the distance we usually stand at friendly gatherings and parties. But of all the zones, the intimate zone between 15 and 45 centimetres is probably by far the most important, as it is the zone that each individual is entitled to guard as his own property. Only those who are emotionally close are allowed to enter this zone comfortably. That is, lovers, parents, partners, children, close friends and relatives. Whilst we might tolerate strangers moving within our personal and social zone, the intrusion of a stranger into our intimate zone causes certain physiological changes to take place within our bodies. The heart begins to pump faster, adrenaline pours into the bloodstream. As blood is pumped to the brain and the muscles, we prepare ourselves physically for a fight or flight situation. Simply put, this means that placing your arm in a friendly manner on or around someone you have only just met may just result in making that person feel a little negative towards you, although they may not readily show it. Additionally, standing or moving too close to another person will make them step back or retreat in order to retain their personal space. One of the many benefits of observing personal space is that you can easily identify the relationship of two people by assessing the distance between them. The closer the hip indicates the depth of the relationship, although when two people are kissing, it should not be assumed that they are necessarily close. Small spaces often alter people's facial expressions, giving the impression that they are miserable or unhappy. Simply because in a lift or on public transport, for instance, where people are forced to stand close together, our faces will show dislike of our personal or intimate zone being invaded. It should be remembered that when greeting guests, don't stand too close to them. Likewise, when guests are seated, consider their personal space. Try to avoid standing too close, thus intimidating them by forcing their heads up at too great an angle. Shaking hands. Waving an open palm was the original ancient greeting ritual that developed into the interlocking of palms, eventually becoming the handshake as we know it today. Originally, exposed palms signified that no weapons were being concealed, so it conveyed an honesty. However, these days, handshaking is often regarded with suspicion. Many people, particularly females, feel very self-conscious about this form of personal contact. Judgments are made, rightly or wrongly, on the way that you offer or make a handshake. There are many different styles of handshakes. You can quite often recognise them at a distance. The dead fish handshake will make the receiver feel quite uncomfortable. And whilst the glove style is intended to give the impression of trust and honesty, it can quite often have the reverse effect. Several factors that affect handshaking. A person's profession, such as a musician, surgeon or any job requiring fine work, will result in a softer handshake. City folk will keep their arms close to their body, whilst their country cousins will go into a handshake with arm outstretched, signifying their familiarity with wide open spaces. Standing back and observing handshakes can be both amusing and illuminating. The basic handshake should be with palms meeting in a vertical position, and then the hands are pumped or shaken 5 to 7 times. Often the left hand is introduced to create another effect. The wrist hold and the elbow grasp communicate an extra feeling of sincerity and trust, and in general should only be used between close friends and relatives. By placing the left hand on the upper arms or shoulders, this usually signifies an even closer emotional bond, and unless the feeling is mutual, the receiver will become suspicious and mistrustful, so it should be used reservedly. One of 3 basic attitudes are transmitted through the handshake. These are equality, dominance and submission. Often these attitudes are transmitted unconsciously. Dominance is represented by the hand with palm down, while submission is demonstrated by palm facing upwards. If you spot a dominant handshake coming your way, you can, with a little practice, reverse it. Most people, when they're shaking hands, have their right foot forward. So as you take the offered dominant hand, bring your left foot forward so as to enter the person's intimate zone or their personal space. This tactic will distract them, thus allowing you to straighten or alter the handshake to that of submission, or better still, equality. Body language. Most basic communication gestures are the same the world over. When people are happy, they smile. When they are sad or angry, they frown or scowl. Nodding the head is almost universally used to say yes, whilst shaking the head almost always seems to indicate no or negativity. The shoulder shrug is also a good example of a universal gesture that is used to show that a person doesn't know what you're talking about, but it's often supported by other gestures such as exposed palms and raised eyebrows, thus illustrating one of the most serious mistakes that can be made by the beginner in understanding body language, that of ignoring the other gestures. In body language lingo, this group of gestures is known as a cluster, whereby 2, 3 or more gestures are assessed together to come to some effective conclusion regarding body language, that is. Probably one of the most effective and best ways to learn more about non-verbal communication is either to sit in a park or a public place and just watch, or turn down the volume on the TV or a movie and assess just how much you can learn by watching other people's body movements and what you're able to read. Once you become more perceptive, these gestures will begin to form sentences and invariably will tell the truth about another person's true feelings and attitudes. Some gestures are open, expansive and positive. Others show interest and acceptance, whilst negative gestures will show defensiveness, disinterest, anger and rejection. In the hospitality industry, we see so many emotions all the time. We can give even better service by reading the body language, causing us to be able to anticipate guests' needs without even asking if they need help, when it's already quite obvious that they do. When guests arrive, more often than not they are tired from travelling. This may be shown by a more serious look on the face, rubbing eyes, hands easing the neck, stretching, putting fingers through the hair fairly frequently, moving more slowly and of course yawning. Similarly, in new surroundings, guests may be a little confused, in which case there will be some shaking or scratching of the head and frowning. Not to be mistaken for disbelief though, where along with head shaking, the eyes are usually wide open.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Hi, I'd like to check in, please.
Certainly.
Since most guests may be feeling exhausted, they will probably show some signs of impatience when checking in. Tapping fingers, sighing and shaking the head, along with a walking back and forth or moving around a lot will be good indicators. The obvious and best course of action is to help with the luggage. Many hotels offer hot or cold refresher towels at this stage, absolute bliss for the weary traveller. If it is at all possible, offer guests a seat and perhaps a refreshing drink, whilst you speed up the check-in process as much as possible. Offering sympathy for tiredness and showing an interest in a guest's journey helps tremendously. Always distract and reassure. All this can happen by reading body language and reducing the number of questions necessary to anticipate guests' needs. Some guests show nervousness at various times during their stay, often recognised by little eye contact, looking around, hands fiddling with clothes or bags, and sometimes sitting right on the edge of the chair. Putting people at their ease is a very special skill, but most nervous people appreciate an inquiry as to their welfare. You can anticipate this and act accordingly. None of us relish an angry guest, since we are in the business of creating calm and comfort. Generally, angry people seem to have a greater effect on others than happy folk. It's fairly easy to spot anger. It usually manifests itself by a serious face with eyebrows furrowed or frowning, clenched fists or closed hands, teeth set together, head shaking, tense shoulders, along with perhaps a defensive arm fold and pacing up and down. It's always more difficult to reverse anger as an emotion, but sympathetic, caring and interested words will often act like pouring oil on troubled waters. When an angry or complaining guest finds a good listener, the story they relate often sounds less important than at first it seemed. A good listener uses their own body language to help. A clever listener nods their head in understanding of the problem and looks at the guest, giving good eye contact. Once the guest is installed in their suite or room, in-room etiquette is not only a part of good manners, but is essential to the well-being and comfort of the guest. Guests will not appreciate their personal space being invaded. Neither will they feel easy if whilst they are seated you are stood over them. Learn to recognise in-room body language. Many guests will feel quite nervous when staff enter their room. On the other hand, be aware that they may also be feeling distracted or absent-minded. These feelings are easily recognised by wandering eyes, little or no eye contact, usually walking slowly in a distracted fashion, and a general impatience to see you gone from their suite or room. If, however, you have posed a question to a guest and they begin rubbing their chin with their hand or fingers, wait until this thought process is complete before you interrupt. Otherwise, you will distract the guest away from the answer. The first answer they were considering could well have been more positive. However, hand-to-mouth gestures often signal other emotions such as lying. It's important not to see these gestures in isolation. Often described as the mouth guard, a hand covering the mouth could be trying to suppress the deceitful words being said. It works both ways though, just to confuse the issue. Sometimes a person who is speaking will cover his mouth to let you know he might be telling a lie. However, if he covers his mouth while you are speaking, it indicates that he feels you could be lying. Running your eyes around other situations gives the opportunity to spot some interesting body language, such as boredom, usually indicated by a blank look on the face, rubbing the eyes or face, raising the shoulders and sighing, drifting eyes and tapping of the foot. You can tell a worried person by a preoccupied face, sometimes showing perspiration, tense shoulders and rubbing of the face with the hands. Without even asking, your first step should be to try and reassure. The more positive body language, though, includes delight and excitement, displayed by the face with smiles and wide eyes and hands rubbing together. Surprise can be recognised by an open mouth, raised eyebrows. A relaxed person drops the shoulders, crosses the legs, leans back in the chair and generally has a happy look on the face. Confidence manifests itself in a variety of gestures. Straight body, head up, relaxed shoulders, sometimes a more exaggerated walk, plenty of eye contact, hands in the pockets, smiling, and perhaps one hand gripping the wrist of the other arm behind the back. Watching guests in conversation often gives pointers, such as hands moving for emphasis, preening and stroking, steepling hands. Upwards indicates an opinion is being given, downwards indicates listening, sometimes with perhaps a slight smugness. If two guests in a lounge or a restaurant are engaged in a deep conversation with heads together and eye contact is being made, you should consider whether your interruption is necessary or timely. If it is far better to wait at a suitable distance from the guests until they become aware of your presence. They will then naturally make a break in their conversation. Being continually aware of body language in your workplace will make your job a whole lot easier and most of the time far more enjoyable. In restaurants, guest needs can be cleverly interpreted. A guest in need of assistance may be looking around, perhaps using a hand wave, while looking at a watch will indicate impatience or annoyance. Shaking of the head might mean exasperation. And by the way, if you're stood with a guest, be sure to notice the direction of their feet. When someone feels the conversation has run its course, very often one of their feet will unconsciously move in the direction they wish to go. When guests disagree, they may turn their body away from other people, indicating their displeasure. And concentration takes many styles: head or chin resting on the hand and frowning. Again, you should ask yourself whether you should be interrupting this guest. A quick assessment is very worthwhile. There are many factors that might inspire and help your interpretation of body language, such as status and power. Royalty, politicians and employers often illustrate their status with far more confident gestures than the people they regard as being on a different social level. Likewise, age, culture and background are other pointers. It's well worth noticing and understanding that certain cultures have a lower tolerance of some of the more liberated Western-style body language. Children and teenagers show far more innocent body language. At this age, they have no conscience about flinging their arms around. However, by mid to late teens, we tend to develop a level of consciousness about our bodies and thus begin to curtail our extrovert indications and temper these gestures to a level of subtlety. As adults, we are very aware of ourselves and seek to control our emotions and hide any hints that these may communicate through our body movements. It's the subtlety that in our industry that is important to cultivate. Whatever our role in the hospitality industry, and regardless of where we work in the world, our own personal body language will set the scene and create the right atmosphere. So how should we look? Well, just by the standing position, we are telling guests whether we are professional or not. Slouched shoulders, head and neck bent, scuffing feet are all very negative pointers. We need to show we are ready for action, alert to our role within our place of work. Try pretending you're on stage or playing to a video camera. This will give you the motivation to be aware of your own body language. Traditionally, actors were always advised not to turn their backs to the audience. Since as an industry we are always on show, this is a good first step. To keep a smile on the face continually is hard work, but a smile should never be far from the surface. The minute a guest walks in, tune the guest in and the world out. Give total attention wherever possible. Good body language in this case means full attention by your body. In other words, try to avoid having the body turned slightly away from the guest, otherwise this will indicate some disinterest. Your feet should be pointing towards the guest to indicate full attention as well. Your head should be up, your shoulders relaxed, and if appropriate, hands should be clasped behind your back, illustrating a readiness for action. With hands clasped in front of you, this shows a slight defensiveness. Make eye contact, very important for recognition and establishing a sense of sincerity. When you walk, walk with an air of quiet confidence, not too fast, but the right pace to maintain professionalism. Avoid touching guests unless to help or guide them up or down steps. Too much familiarity may put the guest off. No preening. Resist the temptation to run your fingers through your hair. Don't tidy your hair, touch your nose or ears, and don't pick your nose. Unless you have something in your eyes, try not to rub them. It will indicate your frustration or tiredness, thus portraying negativity. With your arms folded, you could be sending another negative message. Folding your arms could be construed as one of three meanings. With shoulders slightly hunched, you could be feeling cold. Shoulders set square, defensive or aggressive, whilst relaxed shoulders reveal a feeling of comfort. With an amount of practice, your own personal body language can become a useful tool. Skillful use of good body language will create not just the right impression, because these powerful messages sent indirectly to the guest will most probably influence their reaction, which we hope will always be positive. A positive attitude from guests makes them much easier to deal with, and when it comes to giving good service, we need all the help we can get. So, using this newfound knowledge, put it to work effectively. Use positive body language yourself and learn to recognise and anticipate guests' needs, giving you a distinct advantage in setting yourself apart from your competitors. We trust you've enjoyed this presentation. We've given you the methods. You now have the means to understand those silent words.
Josephine Ive, the definitive butler and valet trainer in Australasia, reveals some of her special butler tips and skills in this unique video presentation.
Now you may be thinking that it's going to be a shame to cover this up with a tablecloth, which is exactly what we're going to do, but if you do decide with a polished surface that you're going to leave it without any cloth, then make sure that you have some really good table mats so that you don't spoil the surface. Now we're going to talk more about centerpieces later on, but I just couldn't resist using this wonderful candelabra of Sylvia's. Now, it may be just a little bit too big for what you're looking for, but find something that you may have that's going to create some interest like this. Now, with candles and candelabra, you might have noticed that the two manufacturers never ever got together, in which case when you put the candle in, it's wobbling all over the place.
Set for Success, the art of table etiquette, will guide you through the design of a formal dinner setting.
Nothing garish, nothing jarring, a beautiful, classy, relaxed table.
And I think it's important to have those lovely comfort feelings about this too. So these are lovely, comfortable, relaxed colours. And you really should allow a couple of hours to put all this together.
Yes, I was going to ask you, how long do you reckon it takes to put this table together?
2 hours. And you should treat it as therapy. It's the build-up, it's part of the lead-up. Do this before you start cooking, so that you feel nice and relaxed when you start your cooking in the kitchen, and you can really then get that real feeling of excitement about the evening ahead.
The creation of special napkins.
Bring the other one round and just tuck the end into that little pocket that's appeared there. Sit the napkin up, and then just turn the top back down, much like you would the cuff of a sleeve, and then just tweak the toe.
The role of each glass, and how to pour wine.
Now, it's best not to get too nervous about pouring wine. Most people do feel a little bit nervous when they first start, but the best sound is the sound of the wine going into the glass.
And lots more. This programme, complete with book, table napkin folding and elegant art, is available now from King West Productions, Victoria. A cut above the rest is aimed at all those who need to know what knife does what job. Featuring Josephine Ive and special guest knife expert Ian Dougal.
Then we have the longer utility knife, and that's our traditional boning knife. Similar in shape there, but flexible for filleting. Again, our carver. Our workhorse, of course, the 20cm chef's knife. And our bread or fillet pastry knife. And our Chinese cleaver.
Josephine explores each knife with examples of their use.
Now, we've seen the range of knives, so let's look at what the individual knives can be used for. Now, every kitchen needs a really good paring knife, and this comes in two sizes, and the one that I'm going to use now is good for slicing and cutting small vegetables and fruits. For instance, when you start to peel an onion, you might just want to take the top from your onion and then peel the skin back. Just very carefully take one layer of the skin from the outside of the onion, or you could use this knife for mushrooms, for instance. Boning and filleting fish often scares people, but with this superb flexible filleting knife, you'll have no problems at all. I've got a beautifully fresh bream here, and to start off with, I've already descaled and taken some of the gills from it, but you just run the knife down that line there. With this flexible knife, you can actually feel much easier. So the idea is to go down through that line first, so that you separate the fillets. And then you can start to take the knife underneath the flesh against the bone. And just keep going underneath the flesh. You can feel and hear the knife against the bone, and the flexibility is really helping you.
While Ian explains how to care for your knives.
The way we grip the knife, and it's possibly the most important thing of all. You'll notice that if we grip the knife in our right hand or left hand, and we grip it like a piece of dowel or a broom handle or something, it's totally incorrect. What we know that when we place the knife onto the steel, we're well aware that that angle is too sharp. We know that, So therefore we can start off flat. We can get it down there where it is supposed to be. But you'll notice that when we come on the understroke, we now have to continually change the wrist. The wrist is now providing the angle. And even though we may start concerned that we keep it flat, you will find that we will gradually start to lift it, and we are now blunting the knife. That's all we're doing. Now let me just go back to the grip. Very important to pick this up.
A cut above the rest from King West Productions, Victoria.